Hello and welcome to episode 139 of the Chills Will podcast. It's a pleasure today to be joined by Felicia Taylor E. A little bit about Felicia, a writer, poet, storyteller, performer, and arts educator, along with being a quote, gently nudging, unquote, wife to her hubby and a fun, quote, trying to stick to a schedule, quote unquote, mom for her son. She's been writing since elementary school and kept a diary or a journal since the fifth grade. Southern Spiced, A Brown Girl's Tale is her first book. It's an autobiographical collection of narrative poetry that shares sections of her life growing up in the 1970s South. And that's going to be one of the main thrusts of our conversation today. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for asking me to join and to be a part of your podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. Obviously, so much of your writing in this collection is about childhood and how it informs later life, and that's the podcast. The podcast has so much to do with that too. So I'd
Mm.
love to talk about that. Like, I mean, we'll get into some of the poems and the specifics, but growing up, it sounds like Texas was East Texas. Is that safe to say was the main place
Yes,
you
it
grew
was
up?
northeast Texas,
Northeast
down,
Texas.
yes, outside of the Dallas area. So I grew up in
Okay.
a town called Denton, Texas. And if
Okay.
you're from there, they would say, "Did you just say Denton?"
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
It's
I
it's it's Denton, Texas.
All right. All right. All right.
Yes, so grew up there too. I grew up in the East Texas area too because my grandparents they lived there. That's actually where I was born.
Okay.
Mm.
So I'd love to know about, about language and literature. I mean, literature sounds all highfalutin. Like, were you reading A Midsummer Night's Dream at 4? Were you reading the normal stuff that we read at 4? Were you into, Babysitter's Club? Were you into, you know, all of the above? Just wonder what if it was like a print rich environment, how much maybe oral stories figured into the equation as well.
It's interesting. My grandmother used to tell stories all the time, and I continued to tell the stories. I always wondered why she repeated things over
Hmm.
and over and over, but now I understand the importance of doing that, of making sure that you have generational stories passed
Yes.
down, and that's really the only way when they're not written down. You
Hmm.
verbally say them. It's in the past. It's always been and oral preservation of history.
Right.
So yes, talking, listening. I loved books. Would be in the library when I wasn't supposed to at school, because we never went to the library
What?
from my home. No, I don't. I
No.
don't remember going to the library at home unless it was with the school.
Okay, I was
Uh,
gonna say, sorry to interrupt you. I thought you were gonna say that the school never took you to the library. I'm like, come on, that's the school's job. I
well,
understand about the house more than the school. You know what I mean?
yes, yes. We were
Okay.
we were we were fortunate. I find now that there was a library. That was just an
Mm,
automatic thing at every school that I grew up in, that there
yeah.
were at least some books,
Right.
somewhere that you could access. And I come to LA and I've worked as an artist in residence with at a
Mm,
lot of the schools, and I find that libraries are a privilege. It's not
yes.
something that
No
every
doubt.
school has. So
No
I hope
doubt.
that we can work on and helping that uh, and find a solution so that
Yeah.
everyone has access to books.
Totally agreed. In my school library, we had Story Hill, which
Hmm.
is, maybe 4 or 5 tiered, carpeted and, kind of hard if you hit your head on it, but, a great place to sit and watch. It had a little, kind of remind me of like Mr. Rogers setup, had a little like puppet, situation if you wanted to.
Yes.
And, we sit there and read our books. What were you reading on your version of Story Hill?
I remember I read a lot of Judy Blume.
Hmm.
And we just had a collection, just different collections of stories, and I would just go to the area that we were supposed to, quote unquote, the
Hmm.
grade levels, the quote unquote go to and read. But I remember reading a lot of Judy Blume
Yeah.
in elementary, lots of folk tales, loved folk tales.
Mm.
And I read things like Alice in Wonderland, and what was the things that were available,
Mm.
for us in our school. I
Mm.
remember when I first read some poetry. I was just blown away when I first heard Maya Angelou and her works, because
Mm,
I'd never seen someone that looked like me have such a
mm,
forum to be able to speak and to be able to share their work, and the kind of work that she shared. It was like she spoke so much truth and
mm,
wisdom, and
mm,
I love that. My
mm.
grandmother had a book of Langston Hughes poems, and I was in love with his poetry. I used to sing his poetry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well,
those are different influences.
yeah. In the acknowledgments you were writing about something about the inauguration poem for Maya Angelou. That
Yes,
was Bill Clinton, right?
yes, yes,
On the
yes.
pulse of the morning. Her
Mhm.
her voice, her voice, man.
It was amazing and beautiful. And I had a poetry class in college, and I don't know why. I This teacher, she just came and brought me a clipping. She didn't really say anything. She
Mm.
just said, "I'd like for you to read this and know more about Maya Angelou."
Oh wow.
And I knew a little bit about Maya Angelou, but just that, reading that inauguration piece,
Mm.
um, I was blown away. I still have it.
Oh my gosh.
It was Yes, the professor was Dr.
Uh-huh.
Winston, and she was at Texas Woman's University, and
Mm.
she was the poetry teacher there, and she just brought me a clipping and let me keep it. So,
Wow. Thank you, Professor Winston. Wow.
yes.
I had a chance to see Maya Angelou in high school at UC Davis, and yeah, absolutely memorable, unforgettable. I saw her years later in LA, actually, at the Redondo Beach Performing Arts,
Wow.
right? And I
Blessing.
remember walking in, and I'm like, there's a woman in a wheelchair in front of me. It was Della Reese.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was just like, I just walked right in with Della Reese and was kind of like pinching myself. Um,
And she has one of those voices too, and
Same, yes.
storytelling ability.
Oh
She was
yes.
amazing too.
Oh yes. Getting into college and into those early adult years, what were you reading? I mean, did poetry kind of set you on a different track? Who were some of the writers, or what was some of the type of writing that really thrilled you?
I have such different genres.
Mhm.
It's funny because I'm thinking there was a time when I was really into Stephen King.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I was really interested in the fact that he was able to keep your pulse going,
Mm.
with what he was writing.
Hmm.
What he had on the page just, kind of kept you at the pace of what was going on, with also with the the terror of what was going to happen.
Hmm.
So I feel like him as an author, and knowing, like, the works of Maya Angelou and Langston Hughes, and you know um, so many others. It's kind of like a combination
Mm.
of, when you're writing, you're telling that story, but also knowing or understanding that there's a certain kind of a pace or a rhythm that needs to be there. And I think I just kind of feel that from
Right.
back before, from what I liked and what I
Yeah.
keep reading.
I'm not into, like, I'm probably I know I'm oversimplifying Stephen King's work to say, like, oh,
Mhm,
he just writes horror, like, but I what I knew of him was horror. I'm like, it's not my thing. But
mhm,
I want to go find it again. We read like something simple like Stephen King on writing, or like how to write, and
right.
I gained so much respect for him. Obviously, for some reason, I didn't think that maybe horror writers maybe had as much skill or put as much thought. Obviously naive, in different genres. And I was like, wow. So I'll never forget that.
Mhm.
Him like giving his advice on writing.
Yes.
Have you?
Alice Walker. I can't forget Alice
Mm,
Walker. I
okay.
just, love her writing, and just the way that her work flows. Just when she's writing about In My Mother's Garden, which is kind
Mm,
of like a memoir in prose, and
okay.
it, talks about so many different stories and times in her life. It kind of, reminds me of Southern Spice, where
Mm,
she's sharing just different chapters, different pages from her life, and
Yeah.
it's really beautiful if you haven't read it. I'm a big fan of Alice Walker as well.
I remember even lines from her works like you'd probably put it to everyday use. I don't know
Hmm.
if you know the story. Everyday use is one of the stories that I've taught in the past, and it's just like
Hmm.
short and just like packs a wallop for sure. And
I
then of
like,
course, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yes, yes. That, well, it's pieces like that that you like to share, because there's some that don't know that they have a love of literature.
Right. Yes.
You know what I mean? Then you share something like that, and they're just like, "Oh, whoa, maybe I should start, reading," or maybe that kind of piques an interest. So
Definitely.
yes.
Yeah. Exactly. I always feel like that interest is maybe not 100% of the time, maybe like 98.7% of the time is dormant. Right.
Mhm.
Meaning 98.7% of the people have that somewhere. They do like to read. They just haven't found the right author yet, or the right
Right,
story or right poem. Right. And
right.
of
Or you feel you don't have the time.
exactly. And of course, Langston Hughes. The piece about him and his brother from World War One.
Hmm.
It's called, I feel, the awkward title at least, but The Colored Soldier. And it's
Okay.
just about how his father, excuse me, his brother, fought overseas,
Yes.
thinking that when I come back,
Hmm.
things will be normal, right? We're fighting, and his brother ended up dying over there, and just the conversations they have back in, the imagined conversations they have. I mean, it's just a gutting piece, but it's one that I'll never forget, and it's just, yeah, amazing. Along with, of course, the classics, whatever you want to call them. I don't want to
Hmm.
be like a Langston Hughes hipster. I don't want to be like, have you read this one? I've only read his non-popular stuff. No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. So, obviously you're a creative person. I wonder how everything developed. I mean, tell us about, like, what are all the slashes? Like, you've done acting, you're a playwright. Tell us about all the flashes.
Um, I don't know how to say where it began, but I can say that I've always been a creative, because I I was an only child for 10 years.
Oh
And so
yeah.
I had no choice but to figure
Hmm.
out things to, do on my own. So that's why I wrote a lot. And I also did neighborhood shows in my
Oh
neighbors'
wow.
garages. And I would cast people and we would create we would create shows. So this is kind of, I think it's like kind of continued, and it's just normal for me that I've been writing and acting and on the stage,
Hmm.
and you know writing and creating the plays, and then saying, you know what, where's my book, where's that book, where is the book, so that I can put all those things down and write it in poetry form, write it prose, and share stories and continue doing that.
Right.
So it was just a I think it was just a, like, step by step by step by step,
Mm.
with the storytelling, the writing, and then bringing the characters to life with acting. To me, it all connects.
Mm.
Um, I know that there's a lot of writers that I know, they're not actors,
Sure, sure.
and they focus on writing, or that's the art form
Mhm.
that they're in, but also it's so much more, because when you're focusing on writing, you're seeing everything like a movie,
Mhm.
you're creating that. So I think, with your question, going back to your question, that's how I went to the next step of doing the short film, because
Mm.
I continue to see things in my head, the pictures, the way that we do when we're writing and we're hearing the characters speak, and we can't stop writing,
Mhm.
because they're still talking to us. And mine just kind of continued and went off the page, and
Mm.
I created a short film, so that was really great.
Well, so I'm going to supply the correct answer to my next
Mhm,
question. The correct answer is yes. So
mhm.
are the books always better than the movie?
Ah, you know, you
Yes,
know it.
comma, yes, but yes, no.
Yes, 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 and yes.
Okay, okay, okay. But so like, do you
Uh, it's
because you do film, like,
mhm.
do you? I don't know if trust is the word, but like, do you trust others like with your work? You know what I mean? 'Cause
You know, it's and I'll go ahead and let you finish because I want you to finish what you're asking so that I can answer it properly.
no, that was about it. Just like,
Mhm,
the idea of letting kind of like letting it go out into the world. I mean, there's something about letting your poetry collection, letting any of your work
mhm.
out into the world. When other people see it, it gets nerve-wracking, I know. But it's like, do you I guess maybe more what I'm asking is like, do you look at how when you watch film,
Mhm.
are you more like analytical than you are able to like enjoy it like on a visceral level because you do it yourself? Do you know what I mean?
I think it depends, and the filmmaking is something that I kind of just started on my end of
Okay.
the producing and writing the film, and then getting it to a cinematographer
Mm-hmm.
working and following me in story form. When you first ask, you ask, is the book better than the film? um we always say the book is better because you have so much more information. In a film you have to cut things down to
Mm-hmm.
you've got to cut half the book out, all of the information. So that's kind of a it's kind of a tough one. I'm going to say book because
Yes.
I'm a writer and a reader. And movies also can do, they can give you the entertainment form. They can let you see another visual part of it.
Mm.
There's a lot of films that do justice to
Yeah.
a work, kind of like they speak from, you're hoping that they're speaking from the screenwriter or the creator or author's
Mm-hmm.
mind and vision. And there's a lot of people that will say they just didn't do it right.
Mm. Oh yeah, exactly. You can't make everybody happy. You can't make everybody happy
Right.
for sure. Definitely.
Right.
With like, I guess kind of related to like what you're reading and just creatively what you're into now, whether it's music or film or TV. Obviously there are great TV programs now.
Mhm.
I sound like I'm 100 years old saying TV programs. Are you watching your TV? But just like, I guess the idea of a muse. Do you like seek out muses? You're writing, listening to Beethoven or Kendrick Lamar or whoever, or
Mhm.
you're like, oh, I want to do a movie like Scorsese, or do you seek out muses, or is that just kind of natural, or do you feel like you block them out, like work on your own individual stuff?
Oh, that's a tough question. I love historical fiction,
Mm,
and I watch a lot of things that have to do with historical fiction. I'm a PBS junkie.
right.
I just am. From the first piece in the book is about me growing up in on Sesame Street and Electric Company.
Classic.
So um, I just haven't been able to put PBS down. But I wish that there was much more, and they're working towards it, much more diversity,
Mm,
much more richness and culture that is being shared in the stories. But I'm a junkie for PBS. So I think the feeling of the joy and just memory is what inspires me.
mm,
So when I'm watching things, the feeling of it, the feeling of the emotion, that inspires me to. I may have a memory of something, that made me just as sad or
mhm,
infuriated me just as much, or
mhm,
I think of something that brought me a lot of joy. I may be watching something that's bringing me a lot of joy, and I'm thinking, wow,
mm.
where's this been? And then I'll think of a moment, and I'll begin to jot down just words and thoughts to be able to come back to continue to complete writing what I'm writing.
Right.
Mhm.
Um, I remember like I wrote one of my first pieces that I wrote for like a workshop in college was quote unquote fiction, but it was based on real life, like for sure, like too much so, right? And it was about a son and his mother, a son who thinks his mom hung the moon or whatever they say, like just like I think my mom hangs the moon, right? Just I absolutely, my mom is an absolute hero.
Oh,
And
it's
so
beautiful.
when that piece was what I thought was kind of ripped up in workshop, it hit me personally. They were right, by the way, but that's a whole different story. They were mostly they were right. They were right. My long-winded question is basically like, you write about your dad, about your mom. You have back-to-back poems, like, talking about them very specifically, their characteristics. How about writing? I don't think you don't trash or rip people in your collection, but like, how about just writing about people who are real and kind of like any nerves or like feelings around that?
Um, so are you asking how does that feel about like uh telling truths about like a piece that I've written or
Yes, I guess it's both. I
Mhm.
guess it's both. I guess, I always want to get into the question of like, and you can plead the fifth or say as much you want about like the speaker as poet or poet as speaker, right? How much of it is you. And then also,
Right.
yeah, secondly, like just about, does that affect the way you write? They're like, oh man, this is personal. And whether you're trashing people or not, like this is, maybe this is not my story to
Mhm.
tell.
It's interesting. Everything that's in Southern Spice, A Brown Girl's Tale, is about my life, so it's true.
I knew
And
it.
then and then the because it's broken into, it's broken into different I don't want to say chapters,
Okay.
selections,
Sure.
because there's the beginning, which is like a certain age,
Hmm.
where growing up, in East Texas and experiences that I had in my own town, where I talk about the racial identity, finding my racial identity
Mm.
through others, through what others said or did to me, or what they felt my racial identity meant.
Mm.
So those are all stories of what I experience. And then Blues of Life and Love, I talk about a couple of people, like Tim Cole, who he was innocent. He was accused of raping someone there in Texas at university, and they found out later that it wasn't true, that it didn't happen, and because of that, now there is an amount that's set for anyone who's accused of a crime
Mm.
and doesn't commit the crime. They receive a certain amount of money because of Tim Cole. So there's stories like that that I didn't experience personally, but
Hmm.
I knew about what was going on with the person, read about it, and it struck me.
Hmm.
Um, and I just wanted to write about and remind people of the injustices, and then how people try to make up for it later. But wouldn't
Hmm.
it be so nice if during that time they had just, listened? Because there was evidence showing that he wasn't there.
Okay.
But he was the person who accused him later then tried to fight for his innocence
Oh wow.
because she realized it wasn't him. This isn't the
Mm.
person, so you've got to let him go free. And
Mm.
he didn't. He wound up dying in prison.
Gee.
So
Yeah,
so yes.
I mean,
Mhm.
reading about him, you of course, I mean, he had his own personal story, but you also feel like he was like a not a stand-in, but he's so many other, right, like black men who
So
were,
many other
right.
so many other black, brown, those of color, and those that have been mistreated or persecuted just because of their race, ethnicity,
You,
language.
you hear about so many, universities or law firms that have like the Innocence Projects and stuff like that, right? It's like
Yes.
because of
Yes.
cases like Timothy Cole and yeah.
Yes.
The the
So
the book like
something
you,
comes out of it, but
uh-huh.
mm,
The book, like you said, has four parts. It's beginning, Piney Woods Time is the second, Blues of
mhm.
Life and Love, third,
Yes, Blues of Life and Love.
and Grateful, right? The you do something really interesting. Not all of the poems, but some of them. I'm not going to put a number on it, but some of them you dedicate,
Hmm.
like, and especially at the end. I mean, you'll see that every once in a while, dedicated to, but like mini poems, and some are really specific, and some are not. Where'd you come up with that idea?
It just spoke to me.
Yeah, yeah.
It just did. It's kind of like Freedom Tree. It's that one is about, a runaway slave,
Mm-hmm.
and people ask, who is this person, because you've dedicated it, to
Right.
him and for his voice. And it was that again, that was something that was whispered to me
Mm.
in the beginning. It says, I got to get up in a tree so I can be free. I got to get up in a tree so they can't see me. I heard this echoing in my head when I was walking one
Mm.
night. And
Wow.
I heard something saying, I got to get up in a tree so I can be free. I got
Mm.
to get up in a tree so they can't see me. And I went home and just started writing, picked up a pen and just started writing.
Wow.
So, so yes, there's something that inspires. There's something that we hear.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that, that you find out about that just, makes you angry and you must write about it.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Well, yeah, the dedication is dedicated to one who needed his story told, who needed his story told. Yeah.
Yes.
That was definitely, I mean, obviously, to an understatement to say that was a very moving piece for sure. The
Thank you.
Back to the beginning, the first poem is, like you said, about Sesame Street, and it's just,
Yes.
it's just lasting power. It's called After School Sitters. What's the term? Latchkey, whether
Yes, latchkey.
right.
It's so interesting because my mom is like, why are you putting, I'm like, Mother, are you really upset that I'm telling people that I came home from school by myself?
So many of us
So
were, right?
right. So many stories. So I mean, so many of my friends have the same story. But yes, after school sitters, because that's
Yes,
what Ernie and Bert were to
no
me.
doubt. Well,
They were it.
you pulled me in, you pulled us all in right away. Really did a great job writing in a childlike, not childish, but childlike, voice. Sounding out rug, and zuma zuma, and all the alliteration, or what's the term? What's the term for onomatopoeia, right?
Hmm.
And quote, taking you were eagerly, quote, taking sitters instructions until mom came home from work. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, that what they said went right. What they said we believed, not in a negative way, but they had so much
Right.
good things. And then I mean, it's kind of like sums up the collection as a whole, like juxtaposed with the second poem, which is goes from innocent and beautiful and idyllic childhood to basically a racist teacher who came down on the speaker because she, well, ostensibly because she was tattletaling or whatever, but it was just,
Right.
you wrote something about how forced segregation had been years earlier,
Mhm.
and the poem was called "Stand in the Corner," and it's obviously that image, is very symbolic and metaphorical. Do you have to get into a different space to write fun, yay, innocent, carefree, and pretty, not
Yes.
depressing, but yes?
Yes.
How does that
Yes.
come about?
Again, kind of thought, kind of what I'm feeling at that time. And I can ride in my car, and I'm sure everybody has this, where if you're a writer, you have to get something down, like, because
Mm-hmm.
you forget it. Everybody
Yes,
thinks that
yes.
you remember it.
I
You
could write
don't,
a novel with the things I've forgotten.
right?
I'd like an American classic. I'm telling you, an
But
American
that's
classic.
that it's that that's kind of with Southern Spice. I began to think of different moments that I felt defined me,
Hmm.
and I would just jot down the thought, a possible title, and I would just continue from there. And then I went back and continued writing. But
Hmm.
I will record on my phone a
Okay.
phrase. I will record a line, something that I can come back to, because we forget. I don't know why we always feel like we're going to remember that perfect
No,
line that we had,
not
or
happening.
it just, that story, it just
Hmm.
goes away. So you have to jot it down somehow.
Definitely. The poem, most of the poems in the first part are back to the carefree, being able to run outside and imagination. I am Pippi is the name of one poem. I love the twirly whirly tornado. I mean, even just things like lefty, just words that we would use as kids. Very innocent, childlike voice.
Yeah.
That one twirly whirly tornado ends with, uh, it start, very carefree, but it gets deep. Layered with the ending lines, just about brown girls who quote could fly to and land in a magical place just like Oz,
Yes.
and ideas of
Yeah.
escape. Even I mean, even kids are like, they want to escape their lives and in fun ways, but also not so fun sometimes.
Right.
Right? And
Right.
Gone with the Wind, and going to the drive-in, quote, Dad's car had style. I love that line from maybe grandpa or grandma, that money was funny.
Yes, because my aunt always said money is funny.
Yes. Yes. And yes, I related so much when there was, what's the famous line? Tell me the famous line, please, from Gone with the
Oh
Wind.
yes.
Frankly, my dear.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
And just when we heard that word, right, like, oh my God, damn, he said
I
damn,
know. He
right?
said damn.
Is that a bad word? Is it as bad as other ones? Is it a different level? Right?
In my home,
Hmm.
uh, you just didn't children didn't curse. I couldn't even
Ah.
say, like, you're telling a lie.
Oh, okay.
I had to say, you're telling a story.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like,
Okay.
ooh,
Euphemisms, right?
yes.
But yeah,
So
just
that
the
was that was pretty, being able to see that and to see that at the drive-in. I think it was, like they were bringing classics back or something.
ah,
Um, yeah, for that month, and I'll never
yes.
forget Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, just a great touch with the childlike diction. The one of the lines in another poem was about, quote, smoke signaled hot cocoa,
Hmm.
like smoke signaled as adjective for the cocoa.
Mm.
And just those, like I said, just those words, the lefty, and ideas of how we would speak and how we think as kids.